As long as there's no major impact on the regular season, it seems that there's no need for concern around New Orleans Saints quarterback Jameis Winston and his early exit on Monday. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering the New Orleans Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much, as always, for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget, we're free and available on all podcast apps and on YouTube as well. And I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media. You can find me every day over at USA Today's Saints Wire, Tuesdays on Locked On NFL, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. We're going to be getting to your questions later on in the episode, including, of course, the hot topic of trading around Kareem Hunt. We're also going to talk about all of the kind of flurry of roster moves and what they mean for the New Orleans Saints, going piece by piece, including the return in terms of the hold-in of CJ Gardner-Johnson. But first, we should start off with the biggest story of the day, of course, with the injury to Jameis Winston. According to head coach Dennis Allen, Jameis Winston had a foot injury that was suffered during 7-on-7s, but it doesn't feel like there's a lot of concern around the injury. Nick Underhill of New Orleans Football tweeting out that per his sources, doesn't seem to be a lot of concern. John Hendricks pointing out that if the foot injury happened over the course of 7-on-7s, Jameis actually participated on the first sort of session of team drills that followed that. So clearly, whatever it was like something that maybe felt uncomfortable after some time, but wasn't something that immediately became an issue. Now, certainly we've seen things more serious set in a little bit later, but this just doesn't necessarily feel like that as of right now. And one of the other reasons why there's not a lot of concern around Jameis Winston is because of the New Orleans Saints backup quarterback, Andy Dalton. And as long as this injury doesn't end up impacting the regular season, the Saints are in a pretty good spot with Andy Dalton. Like, let's not get it twisted here, right? Jameis Winston is the better quarterback. Jameis Winston is QB1 for this team. There's a lot of things that Jameis Winston can do that Andy Dalton simply can't, right? But Andy Dalton is consistent enough. He has over 160 starts in the NFL. He has installed and sort of taught himself or had to learn 6 different offenses, one in each of the last 6 years. So he has some experience here in terms of being able to run an offense, command the huddle in and out. You know, there's a lot of respect for Andy Dalton as well in the roster and in the coaching staff. And Andy Dalton has a lot of respect for what the New Orleans Saints are doing as well. And we heard from Jarvis Landry on Monday in his post-practice presser when Jarvis Landry said this is the toughest offense he's ever had to learn. So having somebody with as much experience and that has so much comfort in NFL systems like Andy Dalton means that a guy like Jarvis Landry, who identifies this Saints offense and this Saints playbook as one of the most complicated or the most complicated he's ever been a part of, still benefits and doesn't end up having his progress stifled if Jameis Winston has to miss a little bit of time, or even if he doesn't have to miss a little bit of time and the Saints just decide, okay, we're going to play this cool, we're going to play this easy, and then give him time, especially considering he probably wasn't going to play in this weekend's preseason game anyway. That's going to be Andy Dalton and Ian Book's game. It's the one where they travel to NRG Stadium in Houston to take on the Texans. That's the first preseason game of the season. Probably not going to see a lot of Jameis Winston in that. So this gives Andy Dalton a little bit more time to get prepared. It gives Ian Book a little bit more time to get prepared as well. We'll talk about the value of that later. But it's also going to give Michael Thomas and Chris Olave and Jarvis Landry and guys like Lucas Kroll even, and of course the other tight ends, running backs, offensive linemen, all an opportunity to still be able to run their offense. This is not the same thing as, let's say, you had a drop-off like going from Jameis Winston to a rookie quarterback, or Jameis Winston to an undrafted quarterback even, right? An undrafted rookie quarterback, or somebody that doesn't have as much experience as 160 games and, over a decade in the NFL like Andy Dalton does. So when you look at where the Saints are left and where they are without Jameis Winston over the course of the remainder of training camp or over the course of the next week or so, they're in good hands with Andy Dalton. Now, if this were to bleed over into the regular season or even bleed into maybe, let's say, the joint practices in Green Bay, which begin early next week, then maybe I'm getting a little bit concerned about Jameis Winston missing a little bit of that time. But for right now, it just doesn't sound like there's a lot of concern here. And look, the Saints have been quick to let us know when there's a real issue. I mean, we saw how quickly Smoke Monday went to injured reserve. We still have some lingering question marks for some of the other guys, but it's pretty clear that if there's an update to be given that's a serious one, that they'll give it to us, right? Dennis Allen telling us right away about Taysom Hill and the rib injury. Now, we saw Taysom Hill start to get his way back onto the field today. That was a part of all of the sort of random roster moves that we saw over the course of this Monday, but a very busy Monday for the New Orleans Saints. But when it comes to Jameis, that's your starting quarterback, right? If there was some type of big concern there, either Dennis Allen's going to talk about it or one of the national guys or one of the other local guys, like they're going to get it and they're going to break it. You know what I mean? So it's a big enough player, high profile enough story that if there was a lot of concern, I think we would know something by now. Now, we should always say, as we always say here, never say never. Anything can happen. It is the NFL. But the good news is that if the Saints are without Jameis Winston just for a short amount of time, that they will be in a situation to where they are okay as long as this doesn't bleed into the regular season. Again, don't get it twisted. Jameis Winston is the better quarterback. Jameis Winston is going to be able to execute the system that you're building around Jameis Winston because he's Jameis Winston and the person that you're building around, right? So Andy Dalton isn't somebody that's going to run the system better than Jameis Winston, but he can run the system enough that there's not a net negative for all of the players on the offense and even the players on the defense who need the competition over the course of camp so that they can continue to get better to see all of that development and improvement stifled in any way. They'll be fine. All right, y'all, coming up, it was a busy Monday, so we're going to recap all of the roster moves and important stories that you need to know, including CJ Gardner-Johnson's holding seemingly coming to an end. And despite a scare, looks like there's good news on the horizon for CJ and the New Orleans Saints. We got all of that and much more continuing on today's episode of Locked On Saints, which we get to bring to you every single Monday through Friday, thanks to our friends over at Built Bar, who have right now an incredible brand new flavor, cookie dough chunk puff bar. So all those indulgent, decadent pieces of cookie dough or chunks of cookie dough that you love in your ice cream, that you love in your protein bars, things like that, you get them in this, but with 4 or 5 grams of sugar, like way less sugar than that container of ice cream, and you're getting 160 calories is all, but you're still getting 15 grams of protein. And that is also why you're getting that marshmallowy goodness of the puff bars, covered, of course, in 100% chocolate. Built Bar has done it again. And that's just this bar. They have several other standard bars that you can try, other puff bars, other granola bars that they have now as well. My favorite is the mint brownie bar, which is just like exactly what it sounds like, your favorite mint chocolate chip, but covered in 100% chocolate. And instead of chocolate chips, you're getting fudge, you're getting brownie, you're getting all that good stuff as well. So go and check them out today. And don't forget to use the promo code LOCKED15 so you can save 15% at the website built.com. Once again, that is promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Thanks again, as always, for making us your first listen of the day every day and for being here with us as we're going with our two-a-days, continuing on each day that the New Orleans Saints have training camp. Now, I want to dive into some roster moves and some big stories that I want to make sure that you don't miss because there's been a lot of news in this New Orleans Saints training camp thus far. Michael Thomas making his surprise return day one, working his way all the way back to participating in team drills today. Even took some tumbles throughout the battle between he and Paulson Adebo, who has been a story in and of himself, have been a ton of fun to watch. Really the highlights of camp thus far. We've seen Tyrann Mathieu return to full participation in terms of team drills. We've seen the injury from Marshawn Lattimore that's kept him out for the past few practices, but watched him come back to doing side work today. Just story on story on story on story all throughout that it's easy for things to get missed. So I want to make sure that we're highlighting some of the roster moves, particularly in a day that was so busy like Monday. The Saints signed 2 new defenders to the roster on Monday. Actually, 3 new defenders, but 2 of those signings became official on Monday. That was cornerback Jordan Brown, formerly of South Dakota State University. He was drafted as a 7th round selection by the Cincinnati Bengals, bounced around, played with the Las Vegas, when they were the Oakland Raiders and then became the Las Vegas Raiders. He was also with the Washington football team for a little while. He was with the Jacksonville Jaguars for a bit. Hasn't taken any career snaps in terms of regular season thus far, but he's somebody that's going to help you fill out that defensive back room and make sure you have the rotation that you need all throughout camp. And if he gets an opportunity to revitalize his career at all, it'll happen here in New Orleans, and that begins this weekend, Saturday, against the Houston Texans, should he remain on the roster there. The Saints also reunited with a familiar face at linebacker. No, not Kiko Alonso again. Talk about a story there. Kiko Alonso signing and retiring the next day last week. The Saints went back to another familiar face, though, to continue to build more depth at not just linebacker, but they've specifically been looking at linebackers with middle linebacker experience, which is something of note. I know a lot of folks really wanted the Saints to bring back Quan Alexander, but did Quan Alexander want to be a backup? Because that's what he would have been in New Orleans. The starters are already sort of set at linebacker. The Saints now effectively looking at depth, and they don't really have anybody that has, outside of Eric Wilson, they don't really have anybody else that has like bona fide middle linebacker experience. Chase Hansen does. And Chase Hansen is somebody that knows the system as well. He's been with the Saints, I believe it was 2019. He came in as an undrafted free agent out of the University of Utah. Go Utes. So they bring him back. He was out there. He was wearing number 40 today. Jordan Brown was wearing number 38. They quickly moved on from the Smoke Monday era there. And the corresponding move to go with that was waiving with an injury designation defensive back Dylan Mabin. Dylan Mabin was effectively the last remaining of kind of the training camp DBs. They got future reserve deals. He was out there doing side work alongside Marshawn Lattimore on Monday. I guess things didn't really progress the way that the Saints would have liked. And so they ended up waiving him with an injury designation, so he will no longer be on the roster. The Saints have a signing per a couple of folks all around, but confirmed by ESPN's Mike Triplett, TJ Carter, the defensive end, formerly from Kentucky. He's also spent a little bit of time in the NFL. 6'4"-ish, 289-pound defensive end. He's kind of a freakish athlete while he was at Kentucky. Hasn't really caught on here in the NFL, but now he joins a really crowded defensive line room, particularly at edge, where you've got guys like Cam Jordan and Peyton Turner and Marcus Davenport and Carl Granderson, and they add Taco Charlton. You've got Tano Passanio in there as well. And that's 6 names deep right there. Scott Patchen's been having a really nice camp as well. It's even 7 names deep, and then you're kind of adding TJ Carter here. So, there's some curiosity there. You wonder if maybe that has something to do with going into this preseason game, and you want the rotation, but you need the rotation without using guys like Peyton Turner or Cam Jordan, who you can expect probably not to see on Saturday's game. So maybe you're just looking to have a deeper rotation during that game because it's a game situation. That maybe makes a little bit of sense. And by the way, TJ Carter, not to be confused with the big safety TJ Carter. This is the defensive end TJ Carter, who's also big. So an interesting signing there. We'll see if he's able to catch on or exactly what he's able to prove during his time in New Orleans. We should get our first look at him during training camp tomorrow, which will be closed to the public, but of course we'll be able to get you updates after camp. And then finally, I want to kind of break down the CJ Gardner-Johnson progression here, because we saw CJ not only return to practice, but participate fully all through team drills, right? All the way up to team drills. We saw him in one-on-ones for the first time, where he had a nice rep against Deontay Hardy, but then you had a couple of reps where he struggled against Traquan Smith, for instance. Touchdown with a fade route by Jameis Winston at one point. He put a nice move on CJ at another point. So, he had a little bit of an up and down day, but he also had a key pass breakup in team drills, things like that, even coming back from his injury. And there was like a little bit of an injury scare at one point while the Saints were working on red zone drills. He went down in the end zone, sort of grabbed his knee, and then he was looked at with trainers for a little while, tried to walk it off. They were as far as maybe to the right side of the field goal post, and they tried to walk him out of the building. So that's the door on the opposite side corner of the end zone. And so they took him out to that side, but then he ended up coming back and he looked good. He was moving around. He ended up getting back in the team drill, stuff like that. So I don't blame the urgency from him, because, guys in the middle of contract negotiations there. So the good news is that he maintains his ability to be able to continue to push for and advocate for himself, because he didn't end up injured. And the Saints get the good news, because it seems like that hold in that he was doing, to where he was kind of augmenting or limiting his practice participation while negotiating that contract, that looks like that has come to an end. You kind of lose leverage once you return. If he goes back to holding in, then you're really at that point, you're going to be deemed a distraction, even if you don't mean to be. So that seems to be all over. That seems to be behind them. So we should expect to see CJ Gardner-Johnson continuously participating 100% each day moving forward during training camp. That's sort of what head coach Dennis Allen expressed were the expectations from the team as well. And the other good news is that CJ was away a few days at the end of last week for handling a family matter. So that family matter has either concluded or at least come to a point to where he felt comfortable getting back to New Orleans. So that's really, really good as well. So CJ seems that all is well heading forward with the New Orleans Saints there. All right, coming up next, do you think that the New Orleans Saints should make a deal for running back Kareem Hunt, who has asked for a trade out of Cleveland? I mean, let's be real. Who hasn't asked for a trade out of Cleveland? So let's break all of that down and why the New Orleans Saints could be interested, but there's way more factors than just that. We'll break that down and answer some more of your questions from today's live show as we continue on to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints, which we'll be able to do thanks to our friends over at dave.com. It's always nice to be able to do yourself a little bit of a favor, help future you out. And what if you could do that by borrowing a little bit of cash? Well, now you can with Dave. Dave is the online banking app that can help you get up to $500 with what they call extra cash. That's more money to fill your tank. That's more money for, to grab a wedding gift or maybe some other gifts, things like that. Maybe if you just need to catch up on bills, basically just allows you to take care of all those expenses that have been stressing you out without any of the hangups, because there's no interest and no credit check needed in order for you to use Dave. In fact, millions of people have already downloaded the Dave app in order to get the financial relief that they need with extra cash and without all the hangups that come with it. So don't borrow from your buddy and end up indebted to somebody that's going to hang it over your head forever. Check out the Dave app today. Download it from the App Store right now. That's DAVE. Sign up for your extra cash account so that you can get up to $500 instantly. For terms and conditions, make sure you go to dave.com/legal. Instant transfer fees do apply. Banking is provided by Evolve, member FDIC. Future you will thank you. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints with your questions from the live show earlier today. As many of you know, we're doing live shows after each day of training camp and then coming back and answering some of your questions as well as expanding on some of the biggest stories of the day here in these pre-recorded evening shows. So we got a few questions to get through here. We got a couple that'll go quick and a couple that'll go a little bit more in-depth on. We'll start with one that I'll go a little bit more in-depth on. This one comes from Faith-Based Workplace, who asked, do you think the Saints can really make a trade for Kareem Hunt? So here's what I would say. If the Saints had interest in Kareem Hunt, I wouldn't be surprised, right? Like, that would make a lot of sense. If you're without Alvin Kamara, you don't have to change any of the playbook because Kareem Hunt can do a lot of the same things. When you have Alvin Kamara, you have a really good dynamic duo to match up with Mark Ingram as well and really, really get involved. So there's a lot of good around the idea of, from a football standpoint, of what you get with Kareem Hunt on that New Orleans Saints roster. Now, can they actually trade for him? That's where things get a little bit more complicated. The running back market is really volatile. I mean, if you think back on it, you see guys like Capri Bibbs and DeMarco Murray in the past getting traded both for 4th-round picks, while a guy like Jay Ajayi is getting traded for a 3rd. Or rather, actually, he got traded for a 4th as well. It was actually Duke Johnson who got traded for a 3rd. So it's so hard to tell like what you can trade to get a running back because that market is so volatile. And so many other things pay or are a part of that negotiation as well. What are other teams offering? What is the ask from the Cleveland Browns? So what I would say is that, do they have the picks necessary to get it done? Yeah, they could. They could swing it. They would probably, be a little bit more. They could probably be a little bit loose with next year's draft selections because they intend or expect probably that Sean Payton will come back to coaching and you're going to get some return in terms of draft picks and things like that from whichever team he goes to. I wouldn't be surprised if that was something that they're already calculating and things like that. So could they trade for him? Do they have the fodder to trade for him? Yes. Would they be interested in him? I think it would make sense. But will they be able to trade for them? That we can't answer. We have no idea because we don't know what any of the other 30 teams are going to be offering in that scenario and what the Cleveland Browns are going to want in return in the first place. So their asking price, the competition, all these other things end up skyrocketing your price. Think back to the contract that the Saints gave Andres Pete, for instance, because the Kansas City Chiefs' interest drove up his market. Similarly, that same thing can happen with Kareem Hunt, who would be, if on the trading block, a team that, or a player rather, that a lot of teams would be interested in. All right, let's get to Ransom Antoine, who asks, why did the Saints not give John Bostic a try? He has been productive. He might have been productive in the past, but was he productive in his workout? We don't know, right? So there's a lot. Again, it's another one where there's a lot of different factors. He might have been productive in the past, but did you see something in the workout that allows him to stand out so that you can project forward and say, yes, he's a good fit for the defense? He might have been a good fit in Washington, but what if he's not a good fit in New Orleans? Or what if there was some specific element in terms of maybe sideline to sideline speed, or a lack of versatility, and ability to play multiple linebacker roles, and ability to understand the playbook, and ability to be able to grasp adjustments on the fly, things like that, that maybe limited the way that the Saints looked at him, so that they went to somebody that they tried out earlier in the month in Chase Hansen, as opposed to somebody that they tried out more recently along with Anthony Hitchens, right? So sure, he's been productive in the past, and I highlighted that he would probably be the guy that made the most sense in terms of his tackling ability, things like that. But does he have exactly what you're looking for if you're the New Orleans Saints? That we don't know, right? We don't know how that workout went. So I think that you have to kind of base what decisions the team is making in terms of who they're signing and who they're not signing on what they're seeing in those workouts, more than you can really base it on what you've seen over the course of the past few years. If that were the case and it was reversed, the Saints might have signed a guy like TJ Carey recently outside of Jordan Brown, but maybe they saw something in terms of the innate ability or skill set or just sort of tools of Jordan Brown that made them go that way, as opposed to somebody that's maybe a little bit more proven in the NFL. So you have to really know what's going on behind closed doors before you can really lay into that. Let's go to Taylor here. Who do you think plays Saturday? Well, it'll be the New Orleans Saints and the Houston Texans. So I'm just kidding. Big question. So I'll kind of go through it pretty quickly. I think Andy Dalton and Ian Book are going to be your quarterbacks. I don't think you see AK or Mark Ingram, so you're going to get a really good look at sort of the bottom of the roster running backs. No need to really see the top two wide receivers. Maybe you see a little bit of Chris Olave, but then you see the rest. Offensive line, I think you're going to see a good portion of the starting offensive line. Maybe Eric McCoy and Ryan Ramczyk. Ryan Ramczyk, you're not going to see. I already know that. You're not going to see Ryan Ramczyk on Saturday. At least I would be surprised. And then really getting to the defense, I think you pretty much see everyone except for Cam Jordan, Demario Davis. Maybe you see a little bit of Pete Werner, maybe not. And you're certainly not going to see Marshawn Lattimore out there. So I think outside of that, like everybody is going to get an opportunity to get some play. I think you might even see Marcus May and Tyrann Mathieu because they're learning a new system. And even if just for a short amount of time, seeing them out on the field and seeing them sort of getting time on task at full speed is really important. What I will tell you, though, is the couple of players that I'm really excited to see, Kirk Merritt and Dejon Dixon, both of those wide receivers, very, very excited to see them. Let's go to Youngblood 46 and St. John Butler, because these two questions kind of go hand in hand as they center around Jameis Winston's injury. John Butler asked if I think that the Winston scare will actually help Ian Book grab a roster spot. And then Youngblood asked if Taysom Hill might get some quarterback snaps now that you might not have Jameis Winston for a little while. And I'm going to say no to both. I don't think that Jameis's injury helps Ian Book. I think Ian Book has to perform. He just had his best day of practice at all over the course of training camp on Monday, so he'll need to build on that. But I don't know that the small scare, what feels like a small scare, we'll see for sure later on, but what feels like a small scare around Jameis really helps Ian Book out, and the Saints are not going to revert and go back to Taysom Hill at quarterback. He's going to continue to serve at tight end. Now, will he be their emergency quarterback if they have no other options to go to in a game? Yes, 100%. But in terms of giving him training camp snaps, I don't think you can do that right now, right? You let Andy Dalton take first and second team snaps, and you give Ian Book some third team snaps, and then every now and then you elevate Ian Book up to second team, and you give Andy Dalton a little bit of a break. But you have the people in the room that you need to be able to continue to not only orchestrate and run training camp practices, but also make sure that those training camp practices are constructive and beneficial for the players that are all around. And that is how you go full circle in a 30-minute podcast. I appreciate y'all so much, as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day. Make sure you come and join tomorrow afternoon, probably sometime around 2:30 Central Time, 3 o'clock-ish Central Time. We'll get into our live show over on the Locked On Saints YouTube page, which will, of course, very quickly also be posted up on all of the podcast apps as well. And then, of course, we'll get to all of your questions and all the biggest headlines in the evening with our pre-recorded episodes, as we do every night. I appreciate y'all, as always, for making Locked On Saints a part of your day, a part of your routine, and saying yes to me and this show. As always, y'all, if you see me, say hi. And if you have anything else that you need around these episodes, around your New Orleans Saints, make sure that you are following me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how your mom and them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.